My wife and I had always been incredibly close. Even when we had disagreements, they were trivial, really. Like the time I upset her by forgetting to wish my mother-in-law a happy birthday. Of course, I quickly made amends by sending her mom a bouquet through a courier and surprising my wife with a new pair of earrings. After that, we made a pact to remind each other of important dates. But as they say, all good things must come to an end. It all started at the beginning of summer. I came home one evening to find my wife setting the table, bustling about with excitement. I noticed there were 3 place settings. "Are we expecting someone?" I asked. "Yes, Seriosha, you'll never believe it. My second cousin reached out to me the other day. We haven't seen each other since we were kids. He's passing through the city, so I invited him over. He should be here any minute," my wife replied, slightly flushed with anticipation. "I don't remember you mentioning him. Do you have any photos?" I asked as I headed to the bathroom. "I'll check," she called after me. A few minutes passed as she flipped through old photo albums, scrutinizing the pictures from her childhood. Finally, she said, "It seems they're all at Mom's place. I can't find anything here." "Oh well, I'll show you later. Come on, let's sit down to eat." Just then, the doorbell rang. My wife opened the door, and there stood a tall, broad-shouldered guy, probably about 10 years younger than us. "Sergey," I said, extending my hand in welcome. Stas shook my hand firmly. My wife, in her usual energetic way, quickly took his jacket and showed him where the bathroom was. Her signature roast duck was already steaming on the table, and a decanter of liquor was waiting. "Well, cheers to the reunion," I said, filling our glasses. Stas didn't turn down the drink, and as we chatted, I learned that he was a manager at a construction company. He had come to town to scout locations for a new residential complex. Throughout the conversation, my wife couldn't take her eyes off him, smiling warmly and making sure his plate was always full. That night, Stas stayed over at our place. It seemed a bit rude to send him off to a hotel so late. The next morning, over breakfast, I offered Stas a ride. "Thanks, but I've already called a taxi." "I still need to find a place to stay," he said. My wife quickly chimed in. "Why bother looking? Stas could stay with us for a while." Not seeing any harm in it, I agreed. On one of the days during his stay, I ended up coming home earlier than usual. In the hallway, I ran into Stas, shirtless, who quickly extended his hand before disappearing into the bathroom. Meanwhile, my wife had locked herself in the bedroom. I knocked on Mela's door, wondering if I could come in. "Yes, Seriosha, I just decided to change clothes. I got a little messy cooking dinner," she replied after a few moments. When she finally opened the door, she started babbling. "It's good you came home early. Stas is back too. Let's set the table and celebrate. We have a reason to." I couldn't quite grasp her excitement. Apparently, Stas had bought a car before he came over. "Take a look. It's parked right under the window," he said. I peered outside and saw a brand new Kia Rio. All evening, my wife stayed glued to her brother's side, and as she got drunker, she kept planting kisses on his cheek. By the end of the night, I had to drag her to the bedroom just to put an end to this so-called brotherly love. 2 weeks passed, and Stas showed no signs of leaving. One day, a colleague at work brought mandarins from Abkhazia to share with the team. Knowing my wife was allergic, I decided to take them to my in-laws' hotel during lunch. When I arrived, my mother-in-law, Lyubov Mikhailovna, greeted me with a wide smile and invited me in for tea. Since I had time, I didn't refuse. As we chatted, she asked how things were going. "Well, you know about my brother-in-law visiting us," I mentioned, taking a sip from my mug. "You must be mistaken. My husband and I don't have any nephews, only nieces. We joked that we're running a women's battalion," she said before heading to the living room for some reason. I sat there, trying to process what I'd just heard. Who on earth had been staying in my apartment all this time? Lyubov Mikhailovna returned with old photos, explaining who was who, but I barely heard a word. I left abruptly, racing home with one thought in mind: to confront my wife about the imposter she had led into our home. When I got to the apartment, I was greeted by strange noises coming from our bedroom. Trying to stay quiet, I approached the door and saw my wife entangled with her so-called brother. Fury surged through me as I grabbed her by the hair and shoved her into a corner. Stas tried to intervene, but got a solid punch to the jaw. I threw his clothes at him, shouting for him to get lost. My wife tried to explain herself, pleading with me, while Stas smugly gathered his belongings, wiping the blood from his split lip, before slinking out of the apartment. I packed my wife's suitcase and tossed it out into the hallway. She stood outside the door, screaming, trying to justify herself, but I couldn't bear to listen. She started stalking me at the entrance every day, begging me to talk. I eventually gave her a chance to speak, but it didn't soften my hatred. I cut her off completely, leaving her behind. Turns out, my wife had taken out a loan and given the money to Stas so he could buy a car. They'd met on some online forum and had been corresponding for a long time. Then he concocted this elaborate plan to meet in person, putting on a whole show just to fool me. It seemed like he got a twisted thrill out of watching me play the fool, utterly oblivious to what was going on. My wife, wiping away tears, tried to play the sympathy card, claiming she was remorseful and still loved me. But I told her again to stop following me and to get out of my life for good. I still can't comprehend how she agreed to this whole charade or what she hoped to gain in the end.